Waddell. We're going to stick in here. We got Tennessee traveling to Death Valley for LSU. This is a noon kickoff. And Jimmy Ott, who I do the Best Bets show with, was very adamant that everybody's pissed off about this because the bourbon doesn't flow the same at 9 a.m. the way that it does at 1 p.m., 2 p.m. And I know Hack is probably agreeing with me here. We'd like to get a little more juice in that stadium if we're the home team.
I'm telling you. I tell you what. You're damn right.
A lot of boost that you can work up there, right?
Yeah.
So Tennessee, to me, is kind of staking their case to enter the highest quote-unquote tier. Hack's a tier guy. We've talked all about this, right? They've held serve thus far this season, and this is a really trappy spot to go on the road to LSU a week before they get to host Alabama. And they've got sights on being undefeated for that matchup, I'm sure. Hendon Hooker's been phenomenal. Brian Kelly has kind of turned things around at LSU after the loss to Florida State earlier in the season. Big comeback win last week against Auburn. But I think this matchup's about the Tennessee offense against the LSU defense. So what do you expect from that Hack, from Hooker in this game? Do you think he's just going to have his way with the LSU defense?
Listen, I think Tennessee does a lot of things offensively that put defenses in a bind. You can't be as exotic. They operate at such a fast pace. They execute the small number of plays from a diversity standpoint that they run at a very efficient clip. So I think it's going to be a challenge for LSU. I think what I think would give the Tennessee team a little bit of a advantage on that is just that they can control the game offensively more so than a team that necessarily could get under center. You know, you got time to adjust. You can slow the game down defensively. You can get different substitutes, different looks, different personnels. Like you got to go out there and just play ball with these guys for 4 quarters. And they're coming within, what is it, 20 seconds or something like that. They try to run a play every 15, 20 seconds. So they're coming fast. They're playing fast. And they're executing really well. And I think Hendon Hooker's been the biggest difference there. He's been the consistent stone, the guy that just drives the ship and hasn't really flinched at all. At all this year. So I think Tennessee's up for it. Obviously, I think LSU's got some guys on defense, but they're going to have to play a different brand than I think they've been used to playing all year on that side of the football.
Trevor, what do you expect here?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. As good as Tennessee is in my mind up until this point, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily battle tested quite yet. Florida, great win. It's a big rivalry game. It was back and forth. 2 great quarterbacks making a lot of plays from an athletic standpoint all over the football field. But that's really like their only big time game. Yeah, they played Pitt. Close game, so maybe my point's a little off. But my point is this. The meat of their season is coming now. And if Josh Heupel and Hendon Hooker, I'll throw him into that decision-making tree as well and culture-driving tree, if they can get this team to truly have a 1 week at a time mentality starting this week in Death Valley, they've got a shot to be extremely competitive. But they have a tough draw, man. I mean, for being on the east side of a great conference, their 2 West teams that they play this year are at Death Valley, LSU, and then Alabama, the number 1 team in the country. So they've got, you mentioned it, Alabama, but shortly thereafter that, they've got Kentucky, and then the week after Kentucky, they've got Georgia, and so on and so forth. So they're about to get into the meat of their schedule. They need, if they want to have a successful season, they need to go to Death Valley, and they're lucky it's an 11 o'clock kick, and have a phenomenal 1 week at a time. Doesn't matter who's across from us. Let's go play our best football mentality in order to set themselves up for success. I think that's the mentality that's going to give them the upper edge in this one. I like Tennessee in this one a lot because of what they've built up to this point.
So I like your point about being battle tested and sort of questioning that a little bit. I think it's always easy to just schedule watch and go back and be like, oh, this win didn't mean much, right? You still got to win the football games. We shouldn't take any credit away from an undefeated team. However, that win against Pitt looks a little bit different after Pitt's loss to Georgia Tech. And the fact that that was an overtime game, really a toss-up of a game with a Pitt team that I don't think is that much of a good football team right now. Florida is hot and cold given the day. Their win against Utah, super impressive, right? But I think on the flip side of this, to me, you could do the opposite with LSU. You could look at their results right now and just kind of get bored with them. However, if they were to sneak away in that crazy Florida State game, right? Florida State came back at the very end. It was the wildest game I think we're going to see all season long, and Florida State won the game. But if they didn't, aren't we sort of framing this LSU team totally different than we are? Like, I feel like people have forgotten about this LSU team a little bit, Hack.
No, I mean, I don't think people have forgotten. I've said this about Brian Kelly. Take all the bullshit that's happened off the field with him getting down there. He's a ball coach now. He's an X's and O's guy, and he puts guys in situations to be successful, and specifically offensively. And he got a guy in Jalen Daniels down there who can do it. He's a versatile player, can do it with his legs, can do it with his arm. He puts him in situations to be successful, and they got guys around him that can make plays as well. So offensively, it's not like he's not handcuffed, really. I think it's just more so a development, identity, and really getting all in top to bottom buy-in into his philosophy from a program standpoint. But I just think that he's in a completely different stage at LSU than Heupel is at the University of Tennessee in that development, if that makes sense. And I think that, to Trevor's point, this Tennessee team, I don't think it starts prior to this year with this Tennessee team. I mean, it goes back into the year before and even the year before that a little bit. I think this Tennessee team's just really been building up into this form. And I just don't think LSU is quite there yet. Now, could LSU go out and get them 100%? They got the players to do it, and they could scheme it up. I'm not saying that they can't do it, but I just think, like, when I'm looking at it and evaluating it deep down, I think that this Tennessee team's just slightly more developed, slightly more mature than this LSU team is right now.
How real is the sensation of a trap game? I mean, as a quarterback in a big time game like this, like, is that a thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely a thing. And I mean, trap game, whatever you want to call it. I just think that LSU is a really good team that they can match up with Tennessee athletically. They're a really good football team. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a trap game. I think, like, when you made great points, right? Like, looking at this Pitt team, the Pitt win doesn't look as good as it did when they played Pitt. But when they played Pitt was a top 25 ranked team, and they, Kendon Slovis was still, like, hasn't gotten kicked in the teeth, and they were excited about what was to come. The reigning ACC champs, the whole nine. I think that's a different team then than they were now, right? So you can make the argument both ways. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to who shows up and who plays, and who's, like I said, I think maturity plays a big role in whether or not trap games are something that really exist or not. Trevor, am I wrong in that? I mean, I think that's like being
I
a
agree with
guy.
you. I wouldn't call this a trap game because it's a top 25 matchup, right? It's a big time football game. So whatever your definition of a trap game is, I always thought of trap game as obvious inferior talent or inferior team, and you're going to go there and you're going to lay an egg and not play to the standard of what you're trying to accomplish on, at the next week or down the schedule, right? I do, Hack, you mentioned something about Brian Kelly and him being a great football coach. And Greg, you asked the question, have we forgot about LSU? But I just want to point out, Brian Kelly's a great head coach. They're in the top 25. And if we look at some of the biggest logos in college football that now have first-year head coaches, all of them except for one are doing very subpar. Florida, Billy Napier, not having a great season, hot and cold, like you said. Oklahoma, 2 straight losses, first-year head coach. Notre Dame, obviously know what's going on there. LSU, we don't know yet. They aren't in the top 25. The only one to this point with a first-year head coach, big logo that I can think of is USC. And I know we've got some thoughts on that and if they've faced anybody yet. But you got to give some credit to Brian Kelly to establish some sort of culture year one to get them in the top 25 at this point, in my opinion.
100%. I think this is a narrative shifting game for Kelly's program, really, at least in year one, right? Because if they win this game, all of a sudden everyone is taking them seriously and they're all over the highlights and ESPN's loving them and they probably jump 10 spots in the poll. Not that the poll means anything. I know we all feel the same on that. But if they lose this game, I could see it nosediving the other way. Fair or not, it's a pretty pivotal moment to go up to 5-1 with a win against a top 10 team in Tennessee versus going down to 4-2, especially if it isn't an overly competitive game. We'll have to wait and see what happens.